7 Biblical Keys to Unlock Unshakable Resilience in Your Life. Life often throws us curveballs, doesn't it? We all face moments when we feel like we're at our breaking point, when the challenges, the setbacks, the trials just seem too much to handle. You've probably asked yourself, how do I keep going? How do I push through when everything feels so overwhelming? I've been there too. But here's the good news. Resilience isn't about being invincible or never feeling weak. It's about having an unshakable foundation that helps us rise every time we fall. And believe it or not, the Bible has powerful lessons on resilience that can help us stand firm, even in life's fiercest storms. You might be wondering, how can ancient scriptures possibly speak to my everyday struggles? Let me tell you, they can and they do. The Bible isn't just a collection of stories from the past, it's a guide for our present. It offers us timeless wisdom on how to deal with pain, loss, fear, and doubt. The lessons in the Bible show us how to keep our eyes on God's promises, even when everything else around us seems to be falling apart. In this video, I'm going to share with you 7 lessons that will help you build unshakable resilience. These aren't just tips or motivational quotes. These are truths straight from the Word of God. They've stood the test of time, and I believe they can transform the way you face adversity today. Whether you're dealing with a personal crisis, challenges in your relationships, or obstacles in your career, these lessons can give you the strength to push through. So stay with me because the journey to unshakable resilience starts right here, right now. Let's dive in together and uncover how you can live a life full of faith, courage, and unshakable strength, no matter what comes your way. Lesson 1. Faith in God is the foundation of resilience. Let's start with the most important lesson, faith. If you're looking to build resilience, your foundation must be strong, and that foundation is faith in God. The Bible teaches us that faith is the key to overcoming life's difficulties. Hebrews 11 verse 1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." This verse shows us that faith isn't just wishful thinking or optimism. It's a deep, grounded belief in God's promises, even when we can't see the end result. When life knocks us down, it's easy to rely on our own strength, but we can quickly find ourselves exhausted and overwhelmed. It's in those moments of weakness that God calls us to trust in Him. Our faith, no matter how small, is enough for God to work in and through us. Just like the mustard seed faith Jesus talks about in Matthew 17 verse 20, a little bit of trust in God can move mountains. Faith is also about surrendering our control and trusting that God has a bigger, better plan for us. Think about the times you've faced uncertainty or fear. In those moments, it might feel like you're walking blind, but that's when faith becomes vital. Trusting in God's timing, His wisdom, and His love for you is what will hold you together when everything else falls apart. Building resilience starts with building that unshakable trust in God. It's about choosing to believe that He is good, that He's in control, and that He will never leave you no matter how tough things get. When you make faith your foundation, you're not relying on your own strength but on the limitless power of God. And that is the key to resilience. Lesson 2. Strength in weakness. Embrace your vulnerability. Now here's the counterintuitive truth. Strength comes through weakness. The world tells us that resilience is about toughening up, building walls, and handling everything on our own. But God's way is different. The Bible teaches us that when we acknowledge our weakness, we open the door for God's strength to work in us. In 2 Corinthians 12 verses 9 to 10, Paul shares a powerful revelation. "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" This passage flips our understanding of strength on its head. It shows us that true strength isn't found in self-sufficiency but in surrender. When we admit our weaknesses and embrace our vulnerabilities, we make room for God's power to shine. Think about it. When we're strong in our own eyes, we tend to rely on our own abilities. But when we acknowledge our weakness, we realize we need God. And that's where His strength comes in. It's not easy to admit weakness. It feels uncomfortable. But remember that God doesn't expect you to handle everything on your own. In fact, He is waiting for you to surrender your burdens to Him so He can carry them for you. It's in our weakest moments that God's grace becomes most evident. When you face challenges, instead of trying to push through on your own, take a step back and lean into God's strength. Embrace your vulnerability and let His power fill you up. So, if you're struggling right now, feeling overwhelmed or inadequate, take heart. You don't have to be strong on your own. In your weakness, God is right there, ready to give you the strength you need. And that's the kind of resilience that comes from knowing you don't have to do it all by yourself. Lesson 3. Perseverance through trials builds character. Perseverance is one of the most essential qualities of unshakable resilience. It's one thing to face challenges, but it's another thing to keep going when the going gets tough. James 1 verses 2-4 tells us, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." This verse gives us a fresh perspective on trials. Instead of seeing hardship as something to avoid or dread, the Bible calls us to consider it pure joy. I know it's not easy. When life's difficulties pile up, it can feel impossible to remain joyful. But James isn't telling us to be happy because of the trial itself. He's telling us that the trial is producing something in us, perseverance. And perseverance is not just about enduring. It's about growing, maturing, and becoming more complete in our faith. It's through enduring the storm that we learn to trust God more deeply and become more like Christ. Think about the story of Job. He lost everything, his wealth, his health, and his family, but he didn't give up on God. Through his suffering, Job learned to trust God in ways he never had before. His perseverance through unimaginable pain made him a stronger person of faith. And in the end, God rewarded him with even more than he had lost. Job's story teaches us that perseverance isn't about simply surviving hard times. It's about growing stronger through them. Perseverance in the face of adversity builds character. It refines us and helps us develop qualities like patience, kindness, and empathy. The trials you face today may feel heavy, but they are shaping you into the person God is calling you to be. So, instead of running from your trials, lean into them. Let perseverance finish its work. God has a purpose in the process. Lesson 4. God's timing is perfect. Trust His plan. Another crucial lesson in building resilience is learning to trust God's timing. We live in a world that demands instant results. We want things to happen now, and when they don't, it's easy to become discouraged. But God's timing is not like ours. It's perfect and it's always for our good. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 reminds us, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." When you're waiting on God's plan to unfold, it's easy to get frustrated. You might feel like you're stuck, that things aren't moving fast enough, or that God isn't listening. But the truth is, God's timing is always right. He knows what's best for you, even when it doesn't seem like it in the moment. If you're in a season of waiting, trust that God is preparing you for something greater. Sometimes the delay isn't a denial, it's just part of the process. Think of Abraham, who waited 25 years for the promise of a son. It seemed like the promise would never come, but in God's perfect timing, Isaac was born. Abraham's story teaches us to hold on to God's promises and trust that even when things don't happen on our timeline, He is working behind the scenes for our good. Trusting God's timing requires patience, but it also requires faith. It means choosing to believe that God's plan is better than our own and that He knows the best way to bring about His purposes in our lives. If you're feeling impatient, remind yourself of God's promise in Romans 8 verse 28. "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Even when things feel delayed or off track, God is working all things together for your good. Resilience doesn't just mean enduring. It also means trusting in God's perfect timing. When you're waiting for answers, don't lose heart. Trust that God has a plan, and His timing will always be right. Hold fast to His promises because He's never late. Lesson 5. Victory comes through prayer and worship. In the midst of adversity, one of the most powerful tools we have to build resilience is prayer. Prayer connects us to God, and through prayer we invite His presence, power, and peace into our lives. Philippians 4 verses 6-7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Prayer is not just a way to ask for help. It's a way to release our burdens and rest in God's peace. When we're facing challenges, we often feel overwhelmed by the weight of our problems. But when we turn to God in prayer, we are reminded that we don't carry those burdens alone. The Bible encourages us to cast all our anxieties on God because He cares for us. 1 Peter 5 verse 7. Prayer helps us align our hearts with God's will, giving us the strength to endure whatever comes our way. And just as importantly, it helps us see beyond the immediate struggles to the bigger picture of God's faithfulness. Worship, too, plays a critical role in building resilience. Worship shifts our focus from our problems to God's greatness. In 2 Chronicles 20, King Jehoshaphat faced a vast army coming to destroy Judah. But instead of relying on military strength, he called the people to fast and pray. God responded, and He instructed them to march out to face the enemy, not with swords and shields, but with singers leading the way. As they praised God, the enemy armies were defeated without a single sword being drawn. This story reminds us that victory isn't always about fighting in our own strength. Sometimes it's about praising God and trusting Him to fight for us. Prayer and worship are powerful weapons in our spiritual arsenal. They bring us peace, they align our hearts with God, and they remind us of His power to overcome any obstacle. When you feel weak, turn to prayer. When you're uncertain, worship. These spiritual practices not only draw you closer to God but also empower you to stand firm in the face of adversity. Lesson 6. Never give up. Stand firm in hope. One of the keys to unshakable resilience is refusing to give up, no matter how difficult the journey may seem. Galatians 6 verse 9 encourages us, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Resilience is about pushing through when it feels like the end is nowhere in sight, when the road is long and weary. It's about continuing to take one step after another, even when the results are delayed. Hope is what fuels our perseverance. Romans 5 verses 3-4 tells us, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope." Hope is what enables us to look beyond the present difficulties and see the potential for something better on the other side. When we face hardship, we can be sure that God is using it to build perseverance in us. That perseverance, in turn, shapes our character and ultimately deepens our hope. Hope isn't a vague, wishful thinking. It's a confident expectation of God's promises. It's rooted in the belief that no matter how hard things get, God is working in our lives, bringing about His good purposes. Even when we don't see immediate results, we can trust that God is faithful, and in His timing He will bring the harvest. Think of the story of Ruth. She faced incredible loss, heartbreak, and uncertainty, but she chose to press on. Her resilience was rooted in her hope that God had a plan for her life, even when she couldn't see the full picture. And in the end, God rewarded her faithfulness by bringing her into a new season of blessing. Ruth's story teaches us that resilience isn't just about surviving the tough times. It's about standing firm in hope, trusting that God is at work, even when we can't yet see the results. So, when life feels overwhelming, don't give up. Stand firm in hope. Keep your eyes fixed on God's promises and keep moving forward, knowing that perseverance will lead to character and character will lead to hope. In due time, you will reap the harvest of your faithfulness. Lesson 7. You are not alone. God's presence in your struggles. One of the most comforting truths in the Bible is that we are never alone in our struggles. In fact, God promises that He is with us every step of the way. Isaiah 41 verse 10 reminds us, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." These words should bring incredible peace to your heart. No matter what you're going through, God's presence is a constant source of strength. Sometimes when we face difficulties, we can feel isolated and as if no one understands our pain. It's easy to feel abandoned, but in those moments, we can remind ourselves of God's promises. He sees us, He understands, and He is right there with us. God's presence is more than just a comforting thought. It's a powerful force that strengthens us when we feel weak and gives us courage when we are afraid. David, in the Psalms, often wrote about his struggles, but he never forgot that God was with him. In Psalm 23 he says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." David found resilience not in his own ability to conquer his enemies or troubles, but in the assurance that God was by his side, guiding him through every battle. God's presence isn't just a distant comfort, it's an active and transformative force. When you are facing trials, turn to God and know that you are not alone. He will strengthen you, help you, and hold you up when you cannot stand on your own. In every storm, God is right there with you, providing the strength you need to endure. Conclusion: stand firm in God's unshakable strength. As we come to the end of this journey through the 7 lessons for unshakable resilience, I want to remind you that resilience doesn't mean you won't face struggles or hardships. It means that no matter what comes your way, you will stand firm in your faith, trust in God's plan, and rely on His strength. Through faith, prayer, perseverance, and the assurance that God is always with you, you can face any challenge with confidence, knowing that God is working in and through you. We began with the powerful truth that faith in God is the foundation of resilience, and we saw how, in our weakness, God's strength is made perfect. We learned that trials refine us and that God's perfect timing is always at work, even when we don't understand it. We explored the power of prayer and worship in overcoming obstacles and how standing firm in hope can carry us through our most difficult moments. Finally, we discovered that we are never alone. God's presence is with us in every trial, providing the comfort, strength, and courage we need. I encourage you today to take these lessons and apply them to your life. The storms will come, but with God's help, you will be unshakable. Let His presence, His promises, and His power be the foundation upon which you build your resilience. Remember, you are more than a conqueror through Christ who loves you. Stand firm in faith, keep your eyes on God's promises, and trust that He is always with you. No matter what life throws your way, you can face it with unshakable resilience because you have a God who is faithful, strong, and ever-present. May God bless you with the strength to endure, the courage to press on, and the peace that comes from knowing He is with you every step of the way. Keep moving forward in faith, knowing that, with God on your side, you are truly unshakable.